Croeso pawb, welcome everybody. Mary Wimbury dwi. I'm Mary Wimbury. Dwi'n cynrychioli Cymru ar y pwthl gwaith Plaid Gydweithredol. I represent Wales on the UK Co-op Party National Executive, and dwi'n cadeirio heno efo James Cook, is-cadeirydd Plaid Gydweithredol Cymru. I'm co-chairing tonight with James Cook, who is the Vice Chair of the Wales Co-op Party. And we'd like to thank you all very much for joining us this evening. I gather it is the first Hustings where members and voters will get to hear from the two candidates to be Welsh Labour Party leader. Firstly, a few items of housekeeping to share. The Hustings is being recorded and it will appear on the Co-op Party's YouTube channel. So if you don't want to appear, then please turn off your camera. Closed captioning is available if you press CC in the tools strip at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And the chat function is open to send in your questions to the candidates. It's an important moment for our nation as the Welsh Labour Party decides its next leader and our country's next First Minister. And I couldn't start without paying tribute to Mark Drakeford, who's been an exceptional leader during exceptional times. His leadership, especially through COVID, has been full of integrity and compassion and shown the difference good governance can make. As we move forward, Co-operative Party members now have a say in who the next First Minister should be. Ballots to decide the Wales Co-op Party's nominee have been sent out to eligible members by email or post, and you have till midday on the 24th of January to return them. Tonight is an opportunity to hear from the candidates, but if you do have any ballot issues, then please email mail@party.coop. That's mail@party.coop. And now on to the main business. We're very lucky to be joined here tonight by two strong co-operators who have put themselves forward as the next First Minister. Whatever the outcome, we look forward to working with you on cooperative policies, and we know that they will be at the heart of government in Wales. We're going to start off by hearing from both candidates about their vision for the future and the role they see for cooperative values. There'll be opening speeches from each of them, then an opportunity for questions. Please submit your questions in the chat, and then a round of closing speeches. We've already tossed coins to decide who goes first. So without further delay, I'll hand over to Vaughan Gethin as the first candidate to speak. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Mary. Diolch yn fawr a nosweitha. It is a pleasure to be here with you this evening. And I know there are many friends and familiar faces who will see from and hear from during the course of the event. As many of you know, I've been a cooperator for more than 2 decades. Our cooperative values of sharing power and wealth have guided me throughout my time before and during the Senedd. Cooperative principles inform my choices as a government minister each day, and they would continue to guide me as your First Minister. Before I was elected, I was a trade union lawyer. I fought cases each day for people who were being exploited or discriminated, women who were being bullied at work, black workers passed over for promotion, disabled people being refused reasonable adjustments, people being unfairly dismissed. All of those cases, those people's stories, made clear to me how life-changing it can be for people to have a voice in a place of work that is built on cooperation, shared power, and mutual respect. Coincidentally, I met someone today who reminded me that I had represented his wife more than 15 years ago during my time as a lawyer. My values and my commitment at work have reinforced why I joined the Cooperative Party more than 2 decades ago. So when I was then elected to the Senedd, one of my first roles was as chair of the Co-ops and Mutuals Group in 2011. There, from the Senade's backbenches, I made the case for cooperatives in social care and rail services. Ever since, I've consistently called for a greater role for co-ops and mutuals across the economy too. But most importantly, I've put the values of our movement into action. Whether as the Deputy Minister for tackling poverty and credit unions, then the Deputy Minister for Health looking at co-ops and social care, and carrying those values through into my time as Health Minister and now as the Economy Minister. When Social Business Wales lost its European funding because of Brexit, I stepped in to fund and save its vital work. For people who want to set up a social business, co-op, mutual or employee-owned business, Social Business Wales is a crucial source of advice as part of the Compass family. Faced with a reduced departmental budget, I chose to support our cooperative movement with the funding that was needed to ensure that this service could continue, and crucially, to support the growth of this critical sector of our economy. Cooperative values in action. And when we're deciding on how to support the foundation economy, as the Economy Minister, I've made sure that more public money has gone into co-ops and social enterprise. Wherever we can, public funds should be put to work to help lift people out of poverty and to reduce inequality. That's why I continually push for more public contracts to prioritise social value. Working with Eluned Morgan, the Health Minister, we've called for and delivered more social value within our NHS. I promoted co-ops and mutuals and social enterprises in housing. A really good example is Creating Enterprise, a modular house builder based in Rhyl who I'll be visiting tomorrow. The push that I have helped to lead now means that Transport Wales uniforms are being made by a group of social enterprises in Wales. Public contracts creating high quality local jobs for people in communities that need them the most. Again, cooperative values in action. In practical terms, I've been responsible for delivering our pledge to double the number of worker-owned businesses in Wales. I'm pleased to confirm that this target has already been nearly reached, and we will reach that achievement with years to spare in this term. That is what cooperative commitment and leadership can do. That's why you can trust me to continue to deliver for our movement, and I want to go further. My manifesto will pledge to double the number of worker-owned businesses again, a pledge that I first made to you. I'll increase in the future the amount we invest in growing and supporting co-ops and social enterprises as part of a fair economy where more people share in the benefits of our collective endeavours. I believe that I have the experience, the values, and the vision to lead our party, to bring people together and to deliver in the tough times ahead. But I'm optimistic for the future of our country. I'm confident that together we can build a Wales that becomes a beacon of sustainability, a country that is inclusive, happy, and united. A Wales where green jobs help to eradicate poverty, where public services are a source of pride and properly funded, where the potential of each citizen is celebrated, championed, and realised, regardless of their background or appearance. That's the kind of future I know that we all want for Wales, and it's a Wales we can build together. But we can only do that by dealing with the challenges of today. And for that, I believe we need someone who has been tested in the fiercest heat and is ready to lead from day one. This is a high-stakes moment for Wales. We face a grim economic picture after nearly 14 years of this disastrous Tory government that has put untold strain on people's finances and public services. And we have the most important general election in a generation on the horizon. We must secure a Labour victory to deliver on the promise of two Labour governments working side by side for communities across Wales. I believe that with your support, I can meet that challenge. I have been in the eye of the storm in the toughest of times. It was our shared values and your support that continued to shine a light during those darkest of days. Helping to lead Wales through the pandemic really was the biggest challenge of my professional life. But working closely with Mark to navigate our way through the pandemic taught me a lesson every day, and I believe has prepared me for leadership. It wasn't just because the spotlight was on me, it put the spotlight on Wales like never before, on the importance of devolution, and of course, our NHS. We were faced with life and death decisions based on our specific circumstances and responsibilities. It was a difficult period, politically and personally. But remember this, when the Tories were partying in Downing Street, when they were opening VIP lanes and wasting billions on a failed test and trace service, when they were ignoring the science and joking about the deaths of pensioners, we took a different course. When they were driven by protecting profits, we were driven by protecting people. Our choices were based on evidence and decency, on partnership and unity. We held fast to our values, and you can trust me to do the same again as First Minister. Our shared cooperative principles have helped to shape my politics, policies, and the choice I've made in every office I've held so far. As First Minister, you can trust me to put cooperative values in action yet again. Our Welsh cooperative movement and the people at its core are proof of how much more we can achieve when we work together, when we prioritise community wealth, when we ensure that people get their fair share. It's due to the efforts of so many people who are here this evening. With your support as First Minister, I will build on my lifelong record of delivering for our movement and place cooperative values at the heart of our country's future. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you very much, Vaughan. Diolch yn fawr. And now I'll just remind people, can we have questions in the chat addressed to Rob Bates, please, who is passing them on to the chairs. And then I'll hand over to our second candidate, Jeremy Miles. Thank you, Jeremy.
Well, diolch o galon am y cyfle i drafod fy ngweledigaeth am ddyfodol Cymru gyda chi heno. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to outline my vision for Wales with you this evening and the central role I want the Co-operative Party to play in delivering that vision. I'm standing to be leader of Welsh Labour and to be the First Minister of Wales because I'm ambitious for my country. Making a real positive difference with people, to people's lives, is something deeply personal to me. I grew up in a working class family in Pontarddulais during the 70s and the 80s, and I saw inequality and unfairness with my own eyes. But I also saw the incredible power of communities coming together in a vast act of mutual support. I'm very proud of what successive Welsh Labour governments have achieved in the first 25 years of devolution, and I now want to play my part in shaping Wales's future for the next 25 years, and to do that in partnership with the UK Labour government under Keir Starmer. And securing this is absolutely crucial. Wales is crying out for a Labour government in Westminster, working with a Labour government in Wales, and I will not rest as leader until we've secured that. My vision for Wales is of a country where we can all live well, where our next generation inherits prosperity and grows up in a just and inclusive country where we all feel at home. Our public services, our economy, and our wider society should give us all a fair chance to fulfil our potential and live the life we want to. No one should be left behind. Everyone should have a stake. A commitment to prosperity and to solidarity and to the stewardship of our natural resources can mean we achieve both greater equality and more wealth to share. Wales should be a nation where young, brilliant people want to come to live, work and raise families, and where citizens of all ages know they can live in dignity and respect. A country looking outwards confidently, celebrating the richness of its heritage and the diversity of its communities. The nation I want to lead is one where everyone has a chance to prosper. And to deliver this vision, I've outlined 6 key pledges. A green economy stimulus targeting all Welsh Government capital and procurement spending alongside new funding models in partnership with local government to create quality, sustainable jobs and tackle the urgent challenge of climate change. Investment in education, just as I have protected our schools budget, to increase the percentage over time of the government's budget spent on schools, the best investment in social justice and in a healthy economy. Cutting NHS waiting lists, establishing dedicated orthopaedic centres for knee and hip replacements to clear backlogs, decent housing in our communities, expanding cooperative housing and tackling barriers to providing more social homes. Fairer fares, better transport, simpler, fairer bus fares to encourage travel as we re-regulate the bus network, and a stronger voice for the people of Wales, strengthening the Senedd, devolving power within Wales, and securing a fairer deal for Wales in partnership with the UK Labour government. I'm a proud cooperator, and I've been a member of the Co-op Party for almost 15 years. I've been proud to serve in the Senedd as a Welsh Labour and Co-op MS since I was elected in 2016. I chaired the Co-op group, and I'm delighted to have been nominated for the leadership by the current chair, Anke Davis, and by a clear majority of Labour and Co-op MSs, people who've seen me over time, up close, day in, day out, know the way I work, understand the Wales that I want to see. I have a firm track record of delivering cooperative values in government. As Education Minister, I've worked with Co-op colleagues to introduce the Robert Owen programme to promote awareness and understanding of cooperatives in schools across Wales, educating learners on the role that co-ops play in the Welsh economy, but also sharing that vision, those values of the cooperative movement across a range of areas: social action, environmental principles, and fair work. How cooperatives are playing their part in making a more sustainable society, in supporting people struggling with the cost of living, the credit unions, the food co-ops, and creating the next generation of cooperators. As Welsh Language Minister, we've put cooperatives at the heart of community wealth building in many of our Welsh language heartlands, making grants available through Compass to help community groups to set up or support cooperatives, social enterprises, and community-led housing projects. And as always, it's the local communities who best understand their needs. For me, the essence of that endeavour, that cooperative endeavour, is mutual ownership, that sense of being invested with others in the collective success of the enterprise, of being rooted, each with a contribution to make. A Welsh Labour that I lead will always promote the values of the cooperative movement and will preserve our deep and special bond with the Cooperative Party. I build on Mark Drakeford's record and put cooperative working and cooperative solutions at the core of the Welsh Labour government's agenda. If elected, I commit to introducing Mark Cora-inspired legislation and guidance to support employee ownership to the full extent of our devolved powers, establishing a commission for community assets, which the Senedd has called for, exploring the expansion of community shareholding in all renewable projects, using our procurement to create more fair work in Wales, revisiting the Co-ops and Mutuals Commission report 10 years on to explore the ideas that haven't yet been taken forward and what more we can do, and improve engagement by Welsh Government ministers with the Cooperative Party to listen to ideas, but also to help revitalise the grassroots of the party. I want the Cooperative Party to be an active part of our policy-making process as we prepare our next manifesto for the next Senedd elections. And that enlarged Senedd that I'm committed to delivering and that we will elect in 2026 gives us a great opportunity to increase the number of cooperators sitting in our national parliament. As you know, I'm in favour of a stronger devolution settlement. I believe in the devolution of justice and policing of the Crown Estate. I think this is consistent with the democratic principle of decisions taken closest to the people they affect, and in the great tradition of social reform, enables us to take a more holistic view of public services. I want to see the Barnett formula replaced with a fair funding mechanism and reform of the Sewell Convention in law, so the will of the Senedd can't be overruled in devolved areas. As Welsh Labour leader and First Minister, I would be committed to working with the cooperative movement as it continues in its important work of advancing solutions to those challenges and opportunities. Before I close, I want to say that for me, being a cooperator is about more than policy. It's about a set of values, a way of working, and a way of leading. I said in my launch speech that public service is about people, as we look for imaginative solutions to the urgent challenges we face and to put ourselves in the best possible position now to flourish in the future. The creativity, the practical experience, the deeply rooted values which are essential to that task are all there in the lives of people across Wales. And at its heart, cooperative leadership is about the we, not about the I. And my approach has always been clear in direction, but inclusive and open to challenge. Those are my values for leadership, and I'd be honoured to have the support of fellow cooperators. Diolch o galon.
Diolch yn fawr, Jeremy, diolch Vaughan. Amser cwestiwn nawr. Gallwch chi gyflwyno'ch cwestiynau yn y sgwrs yn y Zoom, as you have been doing. We'll now move to questions. You can continue to put questions in the chat function in Zoom to Rob. Gofyn un cwestiwn i'r ddau ymgeisydd, a fydd yn cymryd o'i tro i'w ateb yn gyntaf. So we'll be asking the same question to both candidates, alternating the questioner and who answers first. So first question to Jeremy first. How would your values be demonstrated as First Minister? What would your cabinet look like? And how will you alleviate poverty for families, children and future generations? 3 really, but that's one question.
Yeah, well, I've outlined in the remarks I've just made some of the specific commitments I'd make as First Minister to embodying the values of the cooperative movement in our work as a government. So increasing significantly employee ownership by using a statutory lever to drive that forward really significantly. Taking forward that important work that we've been working on for some time about how we can make sure that community assets are available by the community. The Senate has called for some time for a commission to take that forward, to advise us on how we can legislate to deliver that in the way that other parts of the UK have done, and I would take that forward. So some of the examples I gave you in the speech earlier, I hope give a real flavour to that. And I want to say as well, I think it's about a way of working, as I said at the end. It's about that leadership which is clear, which has a strong sense of direction, but which I think my track record in government shows I've been able to do in a way which brings people with me, which is inclusive, and which is always, open to friendly challenge and to ideas. And that's the kind of cabinet I would construct, a cabinet which reflects Wales, which has at least a half of it women, and drawing on the best talents of our party. That is the way in which cabinets in our time in devolution have worked well for us as a government, in being able to draw on the talents of all parts of the party. The last question you put is absolutely critical, and we've seen, haven't we, the effects in the lives of people right across Wales, day in, day out, of poverty and disadvantage. And you will know from what I've done as Education Minister how important that is for me, driven by the absolute conviction that means should not be a bar to educational opportunity. So introducing our universal primary free school meals policy, working with our councils right across Wales, extending access to that Schools Essentials grant, which supports people with the costs of the school day, increasing education maintenance allowance so that for those aged 16 and above, the costs of being at college or being at school aren't a barrier, and we know that they were. That we're the only part of the UK that's done that. Conservative government in Westminster abolished the entire scheme. So real hard evidence of the kind of approach I would take to tackling the impact of poverty on educational attainment. But at the heart of it, those policies and the range of things that we're able to do are a way of mitigating the effects of poverty. And what we have to do is spread that economic justice through making sure our economy is growing sustainably and delivering decent jobs. That, at the end of the day, is the fundamental responsibility of governments, is to make sure that there are opportunities for people, that they can work and do kind of decent work, well-paid work. And what we know is that working hand in hand with the UK Labour government, we can deliver that kind of economy with higher wages, better rights and more secure employment. And that is the fundamental solution to our challenge of poverty in Wales.
Thank you. Vaughan, so same question.
I think there's essentially the 2 questions. What sort of government would you lead? And then how would you actually do something to address and tackle poverty? And in terms of the sort of government that I'd expect to lead and the makeup of ministers, given that the Welsh Labour group has a majority of women, you would expect there to be a proper gender balance within any cabinet that is formed after this leadership contest. It would be ludicrous if that were not the case. I think the point about the style of government, I think there has to be some constructive challenge within and outside the government, and that's difficult to manage in a small institution. One of the things I do think we could and should be better at is how we, not just within the Welsh Labour family within the Senedd, but the wider Welsh Labour family and with the public, we can show ourselves to be more open to listening, to listen and not to lecture. That's a challenge that I think we have at present. And when I've been out knocking doors in a number of key seats in the last week or so, we understand there is a challenge for us on the doorstep. The contest is an opportunity for a new leader to make and renew bonds within the party, but even more important, for our party and our wider movement to renew bonds with the wider public. Because that's why we've continued to lead Wales through the extraordinary challenges of the last quarter of a century. It's because we've never taken for granted our success, we've managed to listen, and we've dealt with where we've made mistakes as well. So that's where I think we have a real point of opportunity and the sort of government that I want to lead. You know, I think people do want to be led at various points in time. They look for people to set a sense of direction, but they also want to know that you're humble enough and decent enough to listen and to reflect if you've got something wrong. And that's why I set up the need to not just review the guidance on 20 miles an hour as an example, but actually to listen to the public, the specific examples of where they think there should be a change. Because if we try and do, if you like, an internal exercise that only involves experts appointed by the government look at the guidance, I think that will create a bigger problem and create an impression that we've given up on listening and learning from the wider public. And when it comes to the broader point around how do you tackle poverty, well, our movement is part of that. If you look at the size of the cooperative economy and the fact that we're growing it, it wasn't just we had a commitment in our manifesto, it's taken practical action to do that. And one of the things I really learned about our success in we're going to meet our pledge to double the size of employee-owned businesses comfortably ahead of this term, it isn't just the state of the law, it's the practical support you provide. It's the examples of different businesses, but it's also then the support that you need to invest in. And that's why I chose to put more money into Social Business Wales as part of the Cwmpas family, effectively, because I knew that there are options in reducing budget where money could have been saved there in budget terms, but we'd have lost a great deal of value. And it actually came from a previous conversation I had with Derek Walker, who, of course, has moved on from Cwmpas into a different position in public life. But understanding if we couldn't replace the support that was available, we would lose not just momentum, but the crucial advice and expert support that is required to turn potential opportunities into reality. And it's the scale of the co-op economy that I think should give us some real hope for the future. And within that mixed economy, I think the broad challenge, how to get more work and better work. That's both about what we do for inward investment. It's both what we do for a success story on exporting. And it's also about supporting homegrown businesses and larger key sites as well. So if you look at all of those different challenges, the work I've already done, the biggest barrier has been the Conservatives in Downing Street. And they are the biggest threat to us being able to achieve our ambitions. On the economy, the flat growth, the fact that working people have the highest tax burden in recorded history, the fact that you have seen the biggest fall in living standards since records began, all of that is a direct result of what takes place in Downing Street. And for working people, of course, the way the benefit system has been changed so that people in work are now worse off, especially if they have children. It's why we desperately need a new partnership with the UK Labour government, not just with them, but actually how powers are used here in Wales. And I'm very proud of the fact that Keir Starmer has already committed to returning both the powers and the money from former European funds to Wales if we have a UK Labour government. I'm proud that I led on that negotiation with the UK Labour front bench, which shows a level of credibility and a level of influence about what we can do in a Wales we already have and the Wales we want to have if I'm fortunate enough to be your First Minister and choice to support in this leadership contest. And finally, just on how to get there as well, not just the economy, but you've got to think about not just school, but the early years, preschool. I've seen the difference that midwives and health visitors make. I've seen the difference they can make to help parents to understand the power of their choices and the influence over a child's life. We've done a great deal to be proud of. I was really proud to be the Minister for Flying Start when I was a Deputy Minister for Tackling Poverty, taking on board something that had largely been started by Hugh Lewis as a backbencher. But more than that, you can see that without continued investment in whole community support for our youngest families, you will lose those people during their time in primary school as well. So we can be proud of what we've done, but there's still a great deal more for us to do. It is so much easier if we had partners, not competitors in the UK government.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you both. And now on to the next question, which Vaughan will answer first. This is the Co-op Party Hustings, so you won't be surprised that I've picked a co-op question. What will the candidates do to help re-energise co-op branches and build on the growing number of co-op councillors we have in Wales to strengthen our grassroots activism and membership?
I think it's a really great question, Mary, because it points to a success story within the party and within the movement. And it's how you go from the generation of the idea that being a cooperator can be something positive to believe in, to then how do you deliver that within your community, within your tier of local government, and across the wider party. I always recall when I joined, it was clear as one of the rules you needed to be a member of a wider cooperative society. So I regularly choose to go into not just co-op retail, but a range of cooperative businesses as well. And it's understanding how you practically can deliver some of that within your local community. It's why I've had that focus on social value in procurement and thinking about what more we can do. Because the cooperative ideal is a way of thinking and seeing the world. It's a way of thinking about how you share not just wealth, but opportunity. And that's why, of course, the Co-op and the Labour Party are sister parties. It's why I spent so much time thinking about how we build and retain community wealth. I think the good news from a Welsh point of view is that other parts of the UK and indeed the wider family across these wider islands look to Wales as a success story because of what we've done. And I'm very proud to have my fingerprints across a range of the things that have happened. To build and to retain the enthusiasm and the activism, though, I think you've not just got to bring together in name the network of cooperative councillors together with Senedd members and members of the UK Parliament. You've got to be able to demonstrate how that goes through into the way that we make choices within our party. So it's not just a manifesto process, then be able to go back and look at here's what we have done, here's what the next set of ideas and what we're looking for. So going back to Social Business Wales and Compass, what can they provide? Going back into the health and social care sector, so much more to deliver as well. Looking at all of those mutuals within the housing sector and beyond that can provide a greater, not just set of values, but a vision for practical answers. And that's why what I've already started, for example, in North Wales and with South East Wales, look at how we understand not just what the balance is between the Welsh Government and those regions of Wales led by local authorities. It's also about the sort of partnership we want and how those values get to be realised in action.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Well, we're a party of ideas and we're a party of practical action. So I think it's really important that we set ourselves the task of making sure that we have a healthy, engaged structure for the party at all levels, including at its grassroots. And I mentioned in my opening remarks that one of the things I will commit to is improving the engagement by Welsh Government ministers with the Co-op Party for two reasons. Firstly, so that we have an open channel of communication to that rich source of creativity and ideas, but also the question I think we need to answer is, how do we use those relationships to help strengthen the engagement of the party, at a community level? And it's particularly important for us, I think, that we have vibrant local parties. Now, we've had a good process of, merging branches, making a more kind of resilient structure, if you like. But if we were honest with ourselves, we would probably say, wouldn't we, that there is much more that needs to be done so that those new, larger branches are that place where people come together and have those debates of ideas. As I said, it's really important for our party in particular, rooted as we are in the politics of community, for our grassroots to be vibrant. So I would be keen for myself as First Ministers and ministers in my government to go and speak to local parties over a period of time and to use that opportunity, I would hope, as a means of drawing people in and, expanding that opportunity for those debates to be had. And they're not abstract debates. The reason this is so important is the second point I made earlier, that we are also the party of practical action, aren't we? We're a party that knows how to turn inspiring ideas into change in our communities. So that community level grassroots engagement in the party is really important. So I would commit to that on behalf of myself and my ministers. The second point is, how do we work with cooperative councillors and make sure we get more? Well, I think we can make sure we attract more by being, strategic about encouraging people to join the party at a local council level. I guess from my point of view, I would point to the work we've been doing in the last few months about how a national government in Wales can work with local government and local cooperative councillors in this context. We've completely restructured the way we fund education grants in my department in the last few months to make it much more flexible, and crucially, to build a relationship of trust with our local councils and a partnership way of working where we accept and celebrate, really, that we have shared values and a shared commitment to the outcomes that we want to try and achieve in our schools. And so having that partnership approach where we trust one another is really important. And you can see that in the work that I've done over the last few months. That's good for the relationship with local government, but it's also a manifestation of cooperative principles. It's that commitment to democracy and to that collaborative way of working, again, with a focus on practical change. So if you want to know what the relationship would look like with me as First Minister, you can look at that.
Thank you. And I'll pass back to James.
Thanks, Mary. I should have said, perhaps at the start, that we're looking to try and get through as many questions as possible. So maybe 2.5 minutes each an answer would be a good sort of target. Inviting politicians to speak with no end to it is perhaps something I should have foreseen. So the next question is about mental health services which are failing, and when they fail, the people who need these services the most. It says living well is about good mental health and well-being, as well as physical health. What will both candidates do to ensure that mental health services are fit for purpose wherever you are in Wales? And that's to Jeremy first.
Yeah, well, just to say, firstly, the priority which the government is attaching to mental health as part of our health policy is absolutely essential. We've absolutely seen, haven't we? In particular, over the last few years, I think, a growing set of problems in our communities around mental health and well-being more broadly. I see it in schools. We have strategies in place in schools, but it's also true right across our health services. And I think, it's absolute priority for me as a future leader, future First Minister, to continue the investment that we've made in mental health services. And I think the opportunity for us is to look across all our local health boards and identify where the really effective practice is happening, where that innovation is happening in how services are delivered, where there's a established evidence base for interventions and systems being designed in particular ways, and making sure that those services and those ways of delivering services can be shared rapidly through the system. And I think there's a case for us to strengthen the capacity of our health boards and our national infrastructure to deliver on that in mental health, but across health services much more broadly. And I've worked very closely with our health colleagues in government to make sure that we have that one public service approach to mental health, as we should have, in fact, for all our health services, where all parts of our public services are working together. In my case, the education system, working with the health service to make sure those preventative services are in place so that we prevent the mental health challenges from escalating. So I think that joined up one public service approach to mental health is the heart of the solution here.
Thank you. And Vaughan?
Thank you. Look, I think that when you look at this question, there is, of course, a need to continue to look at how different services are more joined up, and how you take an earlier, lighter touch approach to prevention and intervention. And the point, it's about really a level of social activity that can be physical or not particularly physical, whether it's men's sheds or knitting and everything else in between. And a lot of those are about remaking bonds between people. And we know that it's one of the big impacts of the pandemic. Lots of people felt lonely and isolated, people of all ages. We intervened in people's lives to make them more of us still alive now to have the conversation, but it has had an impact. If you think about those of us who are old enough to remember what it's like to be young, actually, if you'd had us taken away at the age of 12 or 13 from our peer group and interrupted for a couple of years, if you think about what that does, and all through different stages in life, it's no surprise that young people feel more uncertain about their place in the world today than ever before. It's one of the things that I see in delivering the young person's guarantee. So I've made deliberate choices to provide more mental health and well-being support, both around apprenticeships and how we design and deliver that young person's guarantee, in particular the Jobs Growth Wales Plus programme. The challenge, though, is not just a mental health challenge within work, within education and outside work in our normal lives, how we still deal with the unresolved questions around stigma. There's still a stigma around people saying they have a mental health challenge. I think most of us in this room would recognize it's much better to get past that and to talk about mental health the same way we do talk about physical health. We still need to commit to that. And in that, we need to do more what we've already started on peer support, and in having shows that open up and reflect on the way that the choices you make can impact the person as a whole and not just their physical well-being. I'm really pleased to see the leadership that Lynn Neagle, the Deputy Minister for Mental Health, is providing in this. She was a challenging backbencher who always held ministers' feet to the fire. And within government, she's taking that same commitment to delivering. So I think actually you already see a great deal of innovation and questioning and challenge about have we organised in the right way. But ultimately, this comes back to resources as well. We are running out the resources to deliver the services that any of us would want or need right across the country. And it reinforces why we desperately need a UK Labour government.
Thanks, Paul. Back to you, Mary.
Thank you. Short question this time. What would you do to promote cooperative solutions in community energy? Vaughan.
Well, fun enough, I've met a number of people already in this area. We've got a programme of work trying to support cooperative energy solutions from the programmes we already have, but there are cooperative and mutually owned wind turbines and solar schemes, for example. I met Promo Cymru when I had not long gone into the government, and they offered me an opportunity to look at where I could be an investor in one of those schemes. I chose not to for the simple reason that if I was an investor in one of those schemes, I'd have to declare it, and it would probably preclude me from making choices in the future about how to roll out and support that. So I think actually, when you look at our programme for wanting to use Welsh government-owned land and community-owned land to generate power, as well as something that the government would own, we also do need to think about where community ownership plays a part. And more than that, one of the things I'm keen to make more progress on is in the business end, where actually, if you think about a number of our industrial zones, almost every town of a modest size has some sort of industrial area. And within those businesses, you already see the opportunity for community-owned solutions between those businesses to be able to actually think about how they invest together in creating energy supply and how they're then able to use it not just for their businesses, but actually to be able to feed in to the grid as well. We've got a couple of demonstrator schemes, and I'm looking forward to seeing how successful they have been and whether we can do more. And in the Green Business Loan scheme that I introduced through the Development Bank for Wales, we have found that over 90% of the investments that have been made with those loans have actually been for solar energy. So it's doing the right thing for the planet, but lots of those businesses see it as doing the right thing for their bottom line. So I actually think there's a real opportunity to look at a cooperative answer where you can actually see businesses recognizing their self-interest aligns with each other to generate more power in a sustainable way. And of course, it also goes into what I'm doing as the economy minister in the new business units that we're creating. We now have a much higher standard expected, and you can expect there to be a greater demand in the next round of expectations. I had a meeting coincidentally about this this week about what we'd expect from business units that are supported with public funds. a much greater idea about how you expect a greater energy output from that, as opposed to simply energy efficiency. So we have things to be proud of, and I don't think we shout enough about them, actually, where we already have community energy and solutions, but I think it's definitely part of the answer. And it can also be part of the answer in making the future big developments we're going to see be acceptable. If you're going to develop the giant opportunities off our shore, you're going to need to get that power onto shore and across the country as well. And I think not just having something around having cheaper bills, potentially that Rachel Reeves has floated, I think there's also potentially an answer about community ownership of some of those energy assets as well.
Thank you, Vaughan. Jeremy?
So this goes to the heart, doesn't it, of our climate ambitions, because they're not separate from our ambitions for our communities, and that's fundamental, I think, to the discussion that we are having. Behind my house, there are two cooperatively owned turbines on the mountain. I've spoken a lot with the guys who were behind that about the experience they had of establishing them and getting the community bought in and as members of the co-op. And it was, frankly, challenging. And it seems to me too often projects depend on an incredible level of tenacity and dedication by a very small number of people. And I think there are practical challenges which we can address. So firstly, how do we make sure that capacity and that broader skills base is there? And there's work that we're already doing in that way. And there's obviously much more we can do. But there are practical challenges, sometimes around planning. How can we look at that afresh to make sure we're making it easier for cooperatively owned renewables to be established? But then, the fundamental challenge that we face when we talk about this potential is the instability of the grid and how hard it is to connect to it. So, that's why we need a Labour government in Westminster, which is prepared to invest in upgrading the grid. So I think that's fundamental to it. But I don't think we should be limiting our ambition in this space. We are doing very good work in expanding community ownership of onshore wind facilities, renewable facilities. I think we can look more broadly, including at some of the marine options as well, and find imaginative ways of bringing coastal communities into communal ownership of some of those assets as well. So that wouldn't be a cooperative model, it would be a different kind of model. But I think whether you're looking at a strict cooperative ownership model or a more, community shareholding model, there is more that we can do. We're on a very, very good path. We've moved a long way along that journey, but there is more that we can do, obviously.
Thank you, James.
Thanks. This next question, I'm using the text from one question, but it's covering three that we've had sent in, so it reflects three's the price of one. The Welsh Government is committed to the removal of profit from children's social care in this and in the wider context of social care as a whole. Will you commit to making sure that cooperative models are properly considered? That's to Jeremy.
Yes, I think we've absolutely will. And I think I'm completely committed to the government's policy in this area. And yes, I think looking at cooperative models is important. We've seen in many, many different ways, partly as a consequence of the social services legislation, but more broadly as well, the success of cooperative models in care generally. And I think there are opportunities for us to look at that more broadly as part of that stable, care sector that we have to have alongside our health service. So the short answer to the question, since you're encouraging us to be brief, is yes.
Fab, thanks. Vaughan.
Yes, look, I think it's, as I said in my opening remarks, it's an area that I've talked about from the backbenches. More than that, when Gwenda Thomas took the reforming social care legislation through the Senate, I was on the committee that scrutinised it. There was a new, bright young Senate member who chaired the committee called Mark Drakeford at the time as well. And we looked at, in particular, the point around promoting social enterprise as part of what could happen. And then we've looked at trying to understand how you can deliver that within the system. I've already talked about that within mental health and a range of others, you already see social enterprises around this that are part of what we do. Within the areas to operate, you need to think about a worker-owned model or potentially a user-owned model, where people actually receiving the care are taking part in the care, taking ownership of it. And that's quite difficult in the health and the social care space. But we've got examples where it can work. If you look at what Diverse Cymru already do, I think there's an example of how you can empower the citizens who want more choice and control over their care, and at the same time, what that means for workers as well. So I actually think from when the time when I was the deputy minister and before, we were talking about a number of examples in different parts of the country. I think we've got more practice to build on now as well. So I think there's room for optimism here, but it isn't a completed circle where we can say we have an absolute example. But I'm proud of the work we've done with Diverse Cymru, the way they've looked at building something much more responsive around the needs of the person who has care needs, and how you properly take account of the working person who needs their interests safeguarded as well. And I definitely think that the co-op and social enterprise one has much more to offer in this space.
Thank you both. And now on to another topic, housing. Cooperative housing is the norm in many European countries and even the US, yet the sector in Wales remains depressingly small. At a time of housing and cost of living crisis, cooperative rental and ownership models could provide more affordable options for thousands of families. How would you make that happen? Vaughan?
There we are. Right, I'm unmuted again. I think this is an area ripe for further movement, and it's interesting that we've just had a question about social care and profit, and actually the mutuals in housing associations actually provide lots of the better quality care for adults in particular, and can do more in the children's sector. They're also one of the sectors where you have a different engagement model around how housing works. And you're right, cooperatives are a much more mainstream part of how housing works in other European countries. My brother lives in Denmark, and it's a very, very different attitude to home ownership and what you expect from your home, what you're prepared to put into it as well. I think actually there's work to look back on from the time when Hugh Lewis was housing minister as well. Think about not just the theory, but the practical side of getting the land made available and then having the ownership and the running models available. And you've also, again, as I said earlier, you've got to be prepared to invest in building capacity for people to run those co-ops and what that looks like. It goes into something that I am generally exercised about, which is not just the ownership of properties, but it's the challenge of leasehold that I think desperately needs reform. And I'm committed to leasehold reform as part of not just this leadership process, but through a future Senedd as well, but also about estate management as well. Because I've seen how difficult it can be for people who want to form a housing co-op to actually gain control of the place where they live, particularly if there is an absentee freeholder who isn't interested in selling. The formula you need to go through to understand how you can acquire that is actually very, very difficult. If you don't have lots of your own resources, not just money, but the people to be able to deliver that, then practically it's not deliverable in most circumstances. And yet we know that cooperative housing can deliver not just a more engaged group of tenants and residents who live there, it actually delivers better out in terms of the quality of housing and the community around it as well. So I'm committed to looking at what we need to do to reform the law and leasehold estate management, but also the practical steps of how you build capacity for it to be a realistic choice. Because I think cooperative housing could and should be a much more regular option here in Wales. And I firmly believe if we can make it work here, we'll see other parts of the UK following our lead, as indeed they have done in a number of other occasions through the history of devolution.
Sorry, Jeremy now. Thank you, Vaughan.
Thanks, Mary. So this, I think, the question of housing seems to me to be at the heart of where cooperative principles can be, most effectively applied, because it goes to that sense of belonging, doesn't it? Which we know is so fundamental to our well-being, as well as some of the practical aspects in terms of the quality of housing being better and the quality of land management being better. So, and this is one of those areas of politics and policy where there is huge amounts of enthusiasm, but we struggle to make the reality of that and to harness that enthusiasm to deliver at the scale that we want. There is obviously good practice, but the scale has been the challenge. And I think that's down to three things. Firstly, it's around the kind of capacity and the skills required, in particular in a citizen-led model. And Compass have done fantastic work in this area, and thank you to them for all they have done to move forward the cooperative housing agenda. But there is obviously more we can do to support that in terms of building that capacity, building that skill set, creating the case studies which can inspire people. There was a very good paper which Mike Hedges wrote recently comparing international models, and it's clear from that that a key part of the success here is demonstrating from case studies and so on how you can make a reality of this for citizens. But there are two other practical challenges. One is we know that the funding and finance can be challenging, and in particular in projects which aren't RSL-led community projects, there are complexities in the funding, which I think are a real barrier to taking forward cooperative housing at scale. So how can we address that? How can we work with our own resources, the Development Bank and others, in order to be able to unlock that and make it easier? And lastly is the question of land. We know that can be a struggle as well for community housing, cooperative housing projects. So I would like to see us, maybe even before the end of this Senedd, establish more than one community land trust, which would provide that resource, provide that essential land, which could then become the basis for an expansion of cooperative housing. So I think it's a challenge that we've wrestled with for some time, but there are some practical things that I think we can do to make a reality of this for more and more people. And you'll have seen that it was one of my pledges in the 6 pledges I outlined at the start.
Thank you, James.
I think last question from me, and I have I've added 2 together a little here. So if the original questioner is wondering why their words are slightly different, that's because it's 2. What would you do to promote cooperatives for our sports clubs and music making organisations? So with sports, to give fans a real say, and the ability, and for both of them to the ability to work with local authorities to maintain grounds and places to rehearse and perform. Not just about football and rugby and sort of big orchestras, but also smaller stuff like bowls and Cerdd Dant and whatever else you'd like to do. So.
Well, I'm starting, James, presumably, am I? So I talked a little bit at the start, didn't I, about the importance of moving forward with making assets available to the community. I think this is a good illustration of how that can work well in terms of local sports grounds, for example. I think it's just too challenging at the moment for community groups, cooperative groups, to be able to take on some of these sporting assets locally, and they obviously apply in a music context as well for performance space. I think we could look to the work that we've been doing in Wales for some time, actually. And when I was a backbencher, I advocated very strongly for reform of community asset transfer to community groups. And there was a really powerful report which I think it was the Local Government Equalities Committee did year before last, which set out a very positive prospectus for how we can take forward this policy area. And I think we can learn as well from what's happened in other parts of the UK. Scotland, for example, have moved further and earlier than us in relation to this. And I think it's time now for us to establish that Community Asset Commission that the Senedd Committee was advocating for, so that can help shape our policy in this area and help shape legislation in order for us to put Welsh communities on the same footing as other parts of the UK and devise a Welsh way of doing this. I think that's really important. So on the music part of your question, I think there's a real opportunity for us here. I've introduced the National Music Service in our schools, and as part of that, have worked closely with people who are music tutors in schools. And there are a range of models that they have in the past used for delivering that service. And what you see, there's a huge amount of enthusiasm and a huge amount of goodwill. And I think that is an area as well which is ripe for cooperative support.
Paul, thank you.
Starting point is you want to see as much of your cooperative value and ethos in the way you live your life, and it's got to rub up against reality to be deliverable. because I think there's a danger that you end up um, writing a pamphlet that doesn't end up having any practical impact. So I think in this, there are some good examples already, but it comes back to understanding how people live their lives and the capacity they've got to give. It's about what we can ask and what other people can give and share, both in terms of their time and also the skill that they have and how you can build that capacity. And I'm busy in a number of aspects of my life. I've got a young family, I'm a minister, and there's a leadership contest, there's an inquiry coming up as well. And every now and again, I still like to see my wife. So actually, my time is squeezed. But for lots of people, they find their time squeezed as well, just with getting by. So to then have a number of people to create a co-op, you're normally relying on a small group of committed people to make it start and to bring other people with you. It's why I think housing co-ops are much more likely to get off the ground because people live in their home. So they're physically there, experiencing it on a regular basis. We need to bring people with you in some of these other endeavors. And that's why, as well as looking at the law, you've always got to look at the practical support and the capacity to help people to get there. I'm going to give an example. The Grange Pavilion in my constituency, former Bowls Pavilion, and a number of people wanted to stay that way. But actually, they had a real challenge having enough players to keep it going. The council were facing budget challenges, and they couldn't maintain the service. What happened to turn that pavilion into a multi-use facility? This is actually much more well used across the community. Is there was a partnership with the council and the university as an anchor who helped to build capacity. It's now being run by and for the community in a very different way. I think that's part of the challenge. How do you get the capacity to build up so people have more practical control, not the theoretical control and opportunities to do things, but in practice? And I think it's one of the big challenges for our politics. Not to say I've written down something that looks perfect, but actually, how can we practically move from where we are to where we want to be in a way that is consistent with our values? I think the more examples we have of that happening, the more likely we are to gather momentum because people in this virtual room are persuaded. We're in this party together because of what we commonly believe. The challenge is bringing more people with us about how different values can drive a better way of working, cooperating together, and improving the lives of our families and people around us as well.
Thank you. And we're now going to move on to the last, what you're probably going to think, oh dear, is a fun question. And the aim is to answer it quite quickly. We know that Robert Owen was a great cooperator who inspired our movement. Who would you say has inspired you and your cooperative values, a past or present?
Well, that's quite hard, but honestly, I look at a lot of things that my mother has done in life. It's harder now. I'm taking care of her more actually with my sister. But I think about what she had to do. And my mother grew up in Zambia in a very male-dominated society. Met my dad, who was white, and still managed to run her own business and have a cooperative set of relationships with other people around her, in her family and beyond, because that's how you had to work and how you had to behave to be able to get on. They were not so much subsistence farmers, but market farmers in Zambia. And actually, it's one of those odd things that actually there are loads and loads of agricultural co-ops all around the world because people realize the practical value of it. It's just that we don't always see the cooperative values we recognize from everyone who stands up and says that they're standing up for farming interests in this country. But my mother's made a big difference for me in the practical example of her life, and not just every now and again encouraging me visibly and verbally to do something different, but actually looking at the choices she's made and why she made them and how that informs my choices, not just tonight, but in a much wider sphere of activity in my own life.
Thank you. Jeremy?
I think my most recent inspiration in this area is the story of a food cooperative established in Montreal in Canada by a couple there, which started off effectively as a food bank, but then became a community facility, a community place for people from right across the world who'd come to live in Montreal, sharing food, cooking together, growing food together, learning about nutrition, learning about each other's cultures. And I feel that that sort of project kind of really exemplifies for me what community ownership and what cooperatives are all about, which is that place to come together to share but also to be delivering a really important public service. So I found that very inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your questions. Sorry we didn't have a chance to ask all of them, but we've covered an awful lot of ground. Diolch yn fawr iawn am eich cwestiynau. Gall geisio rhoi arall 5 munud I gloi. I will now ask the candidates to give an up to 5-minute closing speech. Jeremy first. Jeremy gyntaf. Bantarchad.
Diolch, James. Well, when I gave my speech at my campaign launch on the weekend, I spoke about being in the Jim Griffiths tradition of the Welsh Labour Party, that profound commitment to equality on the one hand, and a commitment to a stronger voice for Wales within the UK on the other, but also that belief that the Welsh language is an asset for us all and it can unite us because it belongs to us all. And that politics, which are essentially rooted in the community in the way that his was and in the way that I feel mine are. And when I think of those formative years I spoke about at the start of today's meeting, I think in a way of being raised, in a sense, not just by my family, but the wider community that we lived in, those people looking out for you, looking for opportunities for you, encouraging you. And this is not a sentimental thing. I don't mean this in a sentimental way, but in a very practical way. I see it today in my own constituency. At the top of the Dillais Valley, the Dove workshop established in the 80s by women during the miners' strike, now a real beacon for adult learning in the community. And when I talk of Wales being a nation of second chances in education, where it's never too late to learn, that's part of the inspiration to me. Because it's community enterprises of this sort are not just opportunities for individuals to flourish, important though that is, but through them, that wider community, how that is strengthened, that network of people. And I think as we look at the urgent challenges that we are facing, inequality, the immediate climate threat, that idea of sustainable community wealth building, organisations with a mission owned and run by members, by employees who have vested in the success and rooted locally, that has a big role to play in the future that I envisage for Wales. And if I'm elected, cooperative principles and values will be woven through all that I do. The challenges that we will face in the next chapter of devolution, climate change, pressures on public funding and public services, remaking the economy after Brexit, the pressure of huge technological transformation, a decline in the working age population, any of those would be a huge challenge in themselves, and they are all happening at the same time. And so in order to navigate this, we have to be true to our values, but we've got to bring fresh ways of applying them, fresh ways of working, new ways of working. And I believe that I'm the candidate who can lead Welsh Labour into that next chapter.
Lovely. Thank you, Jeremy. And take it away, Vaughan.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. And thank you all for your thoughtful questions. Of course, after more than 2 decades in this movement, I'd expect nothing less. As I set out this evening, my track record of putting cooperative values into action in government shows that you can trust me to take those principles forward as your First Minister. I would have the experience, the values, and the vision that will be needed to deliver for our movement and for Wales. Throughout my career, I championed investing public procurement for social value. In practice, that has led to real change and public contract for social enterprise and co-ops across Wales. As I said, as the Economy Minister, I stepped in with additional funding to protect social business Wales when they lost funds due to Brexit, to protect their expertise, to protect the growth of a cooperative future. It is not an accident that we're on track to double the number of worker-owned businesses in Wales well ahead of time. It is because I protected and promoted investment in our cooperative future. It is because of leadership. As Welsh Labour leader and First Minister of Wales, I will place cooperative values at the heart of Wales's future. That's why I'm committing to double again the number of worker-owned businesses in Wales. The Welsh Government that I lead will increase the investment in co-ops and social enterprises for the future. And to give an example of why, one of my favourite recent visits was to Elite Clothing Solutions in Ebervale. It's one of a group of social enterprises together with Brodwaith in Llangefni and Treorchy Sewing Enterprise, and indeed Fashion Enter in Newtown, who were delivering the TFW uniform contract. It was truly inspiring to see how disabled workers and others facing disadvantage and discrimination have a new opportunity to shape a brighter future, to see the pride and the quality in their work. To see how many photos they can take in just a few minutes of time was also equally impressive. But these are the things, the value that social enterprise can provide, the value that our cooperative movement can provide to people and a wider community, making a real difference, building and retaining wealth in our communities. And nothing is more important to me than securing and attracting good quality, well-paid work for people across Wales. Good work that helps us to live happy and fulfilled lives. I know that cooperatives and mutuals are essential to doing that. And I want young people up and down our country to be excited and ambitious about their futures in Wales, to feel safe and secure enough to plan their lives, to grow a business, to start a family. I know what it's like to have your place in your community questioned and threatened. And I don't want a single young person in Wales to feel any of those things. I don't want young people looking longingly over their shoulders to a past they think was better than the future we are creating with and for them. There's a well-known saying in Welsh, a fo ben byd bont. To be a leader is to be a bridge. And that is my promise to you. Dyma fi addewid, that I will help to bridge cooperative values to the needs of our country, a bridge between the ambitions of young people today and the brighter, better future for Wales tomorrow. I've spent my career supporting my fellow cooperators, our values and our principles. And with your continued solidarity and support in cooperation, we can continue that at the highest level, leading Wales forward. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you so much to both candidates for your time this evening to help Cooperative Party members make their choice for our nomination. Diolch yn fawr iawn i'r ddau ymgeisydd am yr amser heno. Nid dyma bleidlais hir sy'r abertaifi o diolch. I'll be very brief. This is just closing. It's not the traditionally very long Cardiganshire vote of thanks. We've been extremely lucky to have both candidates as strong cooperators. We look forward to working with either Jeremy or Vaughan, whatever the outcome. Diolch i'r holl aelodau sydd yma. Pleidleisydd erbyn hanner dydd Mercher pedwerydd ar ugain. Thank you to all the members who participated tonight. Thank you to Mary and the co-op staff who facilitated this. And just a reminder to send your ballots back by noon on Wednesday, the 24th of January. And that's it, I think. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. Goodbye. Hwyl fawr.